Sometimes a single knock on the door can change a man's entire life. For 15 years, Zeke Callahan had lived alone in his mountain cabin, believing he needed no one and nothing from the world below. Then Evelyn Hartley arrived, with outlaws on her trail and desperation in her eyes. She was running from dangerous men who wanted her dead. Zeke was a mountain man who trusted nobody. But when she made him an offer unlike anything he'd ever heard, everything changed. She promised to give him what no other woman could. The outlaws hunting her were getting closer. Her secrets were darker than the winter nights. Zeke had to decide whether to trust this mysterious stranger or send her back into the storm. What could a woman on the run possibly offer a man who had everything he needed? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning mist clung to the Colorado Rockies like a widow's veil, soft and gray in the pre-dawn light. Zeke Callahan stood on his cabin's wooden porch, steam rising from the tin cup of black coffee in his weathered hands. At 52, he was a man carved from the same granite as the peaks surrounding him, tall, broad-shouldered, with silver threading through his dark hair and lines etched deep around eyes that had seen too much. His fingers unconsciously brushed against the chain beneath his flannel shirt, feeling the familiar weight of his military dog tags. 20 years in the army, the last 10 as special forces, had taught him discipline, strategy, and how to survive in hostile territory. But nothing had prepared him for the war that came after the one fought in hospital rooms and funeral parlors, where the enemy was time itself. The cabin behind him was solid, built with his own hands from timber he'd felled on this very land. Every log had been chosen with care, every joint fitted with the precision of a man who had nowhere else to go, and all the time in the world to get it right. The structure sat in a natural clearing at 8,000 feet, surrounded by towering pines and accessible only by a narrow trail that switchbacked up the mountain face for 3 miles. Zeke had chosen this place deliberately, remote enough that visitors were impossible, high enough that winters would kill the unprepared, beautiful enough that a man could forget, sometimes, why he'd come here to hide. He walked the perimeter of his property now, as he did every morning, checking the snares he'd set for rabbits, examining the tracks in the soft earth near the creek that ran behind his home. Elk had passed through in the night, a small herd, probably the same family group he'd been watching for years. He knew their patterns, their seasonal migrations, the way they moved through his land like ghosts with hooves. This morning routine had sustained him for 15 years. Wake before dawn, coffee on the porch, check the perimeter, tend the garden in summer, split wood in winter, read by lamplight, sleep alone, repeat. It was a life stripped down to essentials, and Zeke had convinced himself it was enough. The alternative, returning to the world below, to the noise and chaos and constant reminders of everything he'd lost, was unthinkable. The memories still came at him sometimes like ambush predators. Sarah's laugh echoing through rooms that no longer existed. The weight of their daughter Emma's hand in his as they walked through the park on Sunday afternoons. The smell of Sarah's apple pie cooling on the kitchen windowsill. These moments would hit him without warning, usually when he was doing something mundane like chopping wood or mending a fence, and he'd have to stop, grip whatever was in his hands, and breathe through the pain until it passed. Sarah had been gone 16 years now, Emma 14. Cancer had taken his wife first, a swift and merciless campaign that lasted only 8 months from diagnosis to funeral. Their daughter, just 22 and fresh out of college, had tried to hold the family together, had moved back home to take care of her father. But grief was a strange beast. It made some people cling tighter and others run. Zeke had run, not physically, not at first. But emotionally, he'd retreated so far into himself that Emma had eventually stopped trying to reach him. She'd moved to Denver, started her own life, called less and less frequently. Then came that phone call on a Tuesday morning, a drunk driver, and black ice, and suddenly Zeke was alone in a way that felt absolute. He'd sold the house in Colorado Springs within a month, sold Sarah's car, Emma's childhood furniture, the business he'd built doing security consulting for government contractors. Everything that held memories, everything that whispered of the life he'd failed to protect. With the money, he'd bought this 100-acre parcel of mountain wilderness and disappeared. The townspeople in Cedar Falls, the closest settlement 12 miles down the mountain, knew him only as the hermit who came to trade venison for supplies twice a year. Old Pete, who ran the general store, sometimes asked how he was holding up, but Zeke's answers were always the same: fine, can't complain, just need coffee and ammunition. The truth was more complicated. Some days, especially in winter when the snow lay 6 feet deep and the silence was so complete it felt like being buried alive, Zeke wondered if he was slowly going insane. He talked to himself more than he cared to admit. Sometimes he caught himself setting 2 plates for dinner before remembering he was alone. On the worst nights, he'd wake up reaching for Sarah, and the empty space beside him felt like falling into an abyss. But this was still better than the alternative, better than sitting in some suburban house, surrounded by neighbors who knew his tragedy and looked at him with pity. Better than therapists asking him to explore his feelings or well-meaning friends trying to fix him up with their divorced sisters. Up here, his grief was his own. Up here, nobody expected him to heal or move on or find meaning in his loss. His daily routine was interrupted only by the changing seasons and the occasional need to drive down the mountain for supplies. In summer, he tended a vegetable garden that produced more than one man could eat. In fall, he hunted deer and elk, smoking the meat to last through winter. In winter, he read histories mostly, biographies of men who'd endured worse than he had. In spring, he repaired whatever damage the snow and cold had done to his cabin, his fences, his carefully constructed isolation. It was a sustainable life, he told himself, a life that asked nothing of anyone and offered nothing in return. A fair trade. The wind picked up as morning gave way to afternoon, carrying with it the scent of snow. November in the high country was unpredictable. One day warm enough for shirt sleeves, the next bringing a blizzard that could dump 3 feet of powder overnight. Zeke checked his weather radio and frowned. A storm system was moving in faster than predicted, with heavy snow and winds that could reach 60 miles per hour. He spent the rest of the day preparing, brought extra firewood close to the cabin, checked his generator and fuel supply, made sure his water pipes were insulated, stocked the root cellar with canned goods. By evening, the first flakes were falling, fat and wet, the kind that would accumulate quickly. Zeke was splitting kindling on his porch when he heard a sound that made him freeze with the axe halfway through a downward swing. A human voice, calling out in distress, carried on the wind through the trees. In 15 years, no one had ever approached his cabin uninvited. The trail was too difficult, the destination too uncertain. He set down the axe and listened. There it was again, definitely a woman's voice, growing closer. Panic made his chest tight. This was what he'd built his life to avoid contact with the outside world, with its complications and demands and inevitable disappointments. The voice came again, clearer now, and with it the sound of someone crashing through the underbrush. Zeke stepped to the edge of his porch and peered into the gathering darkness. Snow was falling steadier now, reducing visibility to maybe 50 yards. Then he saw her, a figure stumbling up the trail, moving with the desperate rhythm of someone running for her life. As she drew closer, he could make out more details. A woman, maybe 35, dark hair whipping around her face, clothes torn and muddy. She was looking over her shoulder frequently, as if expecting pursuit. When she saw his cabin, saw him standing on the porch, she changed direction and ran straight toward him. Even from a distance, he could see the desperation in her movements, the way she favored her left leg as if injured. This was his worst nightmare, someone in trouble, someone who would need help, someone who would shatter the careful walls he'd built around his solitude. Every instinct told him to go inside, lock the door, pretend he hadn't seen her. Let her find shelter elsewhere, let her problems remain her own. But as she drew closer, as he saw the genuine terror in her eyes and the way she kept looking back at the dark forest behind her, another instinct kicked in, one that was older and deeper than his need for isolation, one that remembered what it meant to be human, to help, to protect. She reached the base of his porch steps and looked up at him, chest heaving from exertion and fear. Her eyes were green, he noticed, the color of deep forest pools. Beautiful eyes, despite the desperation filling them. "Please," she gasped, one hand pressed against her side. "I need help. They're coming." Zeke stared down at the woman for a long moment, his mind racing through possibilities and consequences. The smart thing would be to send her on her way, point her towards Cedar Falls, maybe offer her a coat for the journey. But the wind was picking up, and snow was falling harder now. In this weather, 12 miles through mountain wilderness would be a death sentence. "Who's coming?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. "Men who want me dead," she said simply, no drama in her tone, just weary fact. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, and that's when he noticed the dark stain on the fabric. Blood. Before he could think better of it, Zeke stepped aside and gestured toward his door. "Get inside. We'll sort this out once you're warm." She climbed the steps carefully, still favoring her left side, and followed him into the cabin. The interior was Spartan but comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, with a worn leather chair and small table nearby. A kitchen occupied the far corner, and a ladder led to a sleeping loft under the pitched roof. Everything was clean, organized, purposeful. Evelyn, she'd given him her name as they entered, stood dripping snow onto his wooden floor, taking in her surroundings with the quick, assessing gaze of someone accustomed to evaluating threats and exits. She moved like someone with training, he noticed. Not military, but something. "Sit," Zeke said, pointing to the chair by the fire. "I'll get something for that bleeding." She remained standing. "I can't stay long. If they track me here, they'll kill you too." "Who are they?" "Men who work for someone I used to know, someone I ran away from." She touched her side gingerly. "I thought I'd lost them in Denver, but they picked up my trail again." Zeke studied her face, looking for deception. He'd been lied to by experts in his military days, had learned to read the subtle tells that betrayed dishonesty. But this woman seemed genuinely frightened, and the blood on her coat was real enough. "How many?" he asked. 3, maybe 4. They were about an hour behind me when I started up your mountain. An hour in good weather. In this storm, probably twice that. Still, it meant they had some time. Zeke pulled a first aid kit from a cabinet and set it on the table. "Let me see that wound." Evelyn hesitated, then slowly pulled off her coat. Underneath, she wore a simple wool sweater that was torn along the left side, revealing a gash about 4 inches long across her ribs. Not deep enough to be life-threatening, but it needed attention. As she lifted the sweater, something metallic fell to the floor with a soft thud. Zeke bent to pick it up, a folded piece of paper, stained with blood. When he started to hand it back, she grabbed his wrist. "Don't read that," she said quickly. "Please. It's complicated." Their eyes met, and for a moment, something passed between them that had nothing to do with the immediate crisis. Recognition, maybe. The understanding of two people who carried secrets too heavy to share. Zeke nodded and set the letter on the table without unfolding it. "Sit down. Let me clean this." This time, she complied, settling into the leather chair with a soft grunt of pain. As Zeke worked, cleaning the wound with antiseptic and applying butterfly bandages, she told him more of her story. She'd been married to a man named Marcus Webb, not a good man, she said, involved in things that existed in the shadows between legal and criminal. When she'd tried to leave him 2 years ago, he'd made it clear that wasn't an option. "I disappeared," she said, watching Zeke's hands as he worked. He had gentle hands for such a large man, careful and precise. Changed my name, moved around, stayed invisible. But Marcus has connections everywhere. It was only a matter of time. What changed? Why are they after you now? Evelyn was quiet for so long that Zeke thought she wouldn't answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. He's dying, cancer, and he wants me back before... She stopped, shook her head. He wants me back. The wind howled around the cabin, rattling the windows. Through the glass, Zeke could see the storm intensifying, snow falling so thick it was like a white curtain drawn across the world. Good. That would slow down any pursuit, buy them time to figure out what to do next. There, he said, taping the last bandage in place. That should hold. Thank you. Evelyn pulled her sweater back down and looked around the cabin again. You live here alone? Yes. How long? 15 years. She nodded as if that explained something. You're running from something too. It wasn't a question, and Zeke didn't answer it. Instead, he moved to the window and peered out into the storm. The trail would be invisible now, covered in snow, but experienced trackers could still follow it. And if these men were as dangerous as Evelyn claimed, they'd be experienced. Your husband, he said, what kind of connections does he have? The kind that means money doesn't matter, neither do laws, or borders, or other people's lives. Her voice carried a weight of accumulated fear and exhaustion. He's not just dying, he's desperate, and desperate men do terrible things. Zeke turned back to her, studying her face in the firelight. There was intelligence there, and strength, but also a deep sadness that reminded him of his own reflection. This was a woman who'd been forced to make impossible choices, who'd given up everything for the chance at freedom. Why me? He asked. Of all the places you could have run, why up a mountain in the middle of nowhere? I wasn't running to you specifically, I was just running. She managed a tired smile. But when I saw your light through the trees, when I realized there was someone up here who'd chosen to live this far from everything, I thought maybe you'd understand. Understand what? What it's like to need to disappear. Outside, something crashed in the forest. A tree branch weighted down with snow, probably, but both of them tensed. Zeke moved to his rifle rack and pulled down a Winchester .36, checking the chamber automatically. I should go, Evelyn said, starting to rise. I've brought enough trouble to your door. Sit down. The command came out sharper than he'd intended, carrying the authority of his military years. Nobody's traveling in this weather. We'll figure out the rest when the storm passes. She settled back into the chair, and for the first time since she'd arrived, some of the tension seemed to leave her shoulders. I meant what I said earlier. If you let me stay, I'll give you something no human woman can. Zeke raised an eyebrow. Such as? Peace. The word hung in the air between them like a promise. Real peace, the kind you've been looking for up here but haven't found. Before he could ask what she meant, the lights went out. The storm had taken down a power line somewhere, plunging the cabin into darkness lit only by the flickering fire. In that sudden silence, they both heard it, the distant sound of voices, carried on the wind. The men hunting Evelyn Hartley had found the mountain. Zeke moved with practiced silence, extinguishing the fire with a shovel full of ash and motioning for Evelyn to follow him toward the back of the cabin. From a wooden chest beside his bed, he pulled out gear he hadn't touched in years: night vision scope, tactical vest, boxes of ammunition. His military training kicked in automatically, 15 years of mountain living falling away like shed skin. How many rounds do you have? Evelyn whispered. He glanced at her, surprised by the question. Most civilians wouldn't think about ammunition in a crisis. Enough. You know firearms? My father taught me to hunt when I was 12. Been carrying a concealed permit for 3 years. She patted her hip, where a slight bulge beneath her sweater suggested a holster. .22 caliber. Not much against whatever they're carrying, but better than nothing. 2. Zeke nodded grimly. A woman who thought tactically under pressure. That would help their chances considerably. He moved to the window and carefully peered through a gap in the curtains. The voices were closer now, probably at the base of his trail. In this weather, it would take them at least an hour to reach the cabin, longer if they were unfamiliar with mountain terrain. But they were coming, that much was certain. "We have options," he said quietly, checking his rifle one more time. "I can hide you in the root cellar. Tell them I never saw you. Or we can make a stand here. This cabin's built like a fortress, and I know every inch of this mountain." Evelyn moved beside him at the window, close enough that he could smell her hair, soap and pine needles, and something uniquely her. "There's a third option, which is, we disappear, together." She turned to face him, her green eyes serious in the dim light. "I know these mountains too, Zeke. I've been hiding in wilderness areas for 2 years. I know how to move without leaving sign, how to survive in conditions that would kill most people." From his chest of belongings, she pulled out something that made Zeke's breath catch, a small wooden cross, hand-carved and worn smooth by decades of handling. He'd made it himself as a boy, working alongside his father in their garage workshop. It had belonged to his father, then to him, and he'd thought it lost years ago. "Where did you get that?" His voice was rough with unexpected emotion. "From the table by your chair. I knocked it off when I sat down." She held it out to him. "Your father's work?" "Mine, but he taught me." Zeke took the cross, feeling the familiar weight of it in his palm. He'd carved it during his first deployment, when missing home felt like a physical ache. His father had taught him woodworking as a boy, passing down not just technique, but a kind of patient attention to detail that had served Zeke well in both military and civilian life. "He was a good teacher," Evelyn said, studying the intricate details he'd carved into the simple form. "This kind of work requires patience, faith." Had faith once. Zeke slipped the cross into his pocket, lost it, along with everything else. "Maybe it's time to find it again." Before he could respond, the sound of voices grew louder, closer. Through the window, he caught a glimpse of flashlight beams sweeping through the trees below. Professional patterns, these weren't amateur thugs, but trained operators. "They're good," Evelyn murmured, watching the lights. "Military or ex-military, Marcus always hired the best. Then we give them what they expect, but not where they expect it." Zeke moved to his closet and pulled out winter gear. Heavy coats, insulated boots, survival packs. The old mining camp 2 miles north. Abandoned since the 70s, but the buildings are still solid. Plenty of places to set an ambush. "You want to lead them away from here?" "I want to control the battlefield." He handed her a pack and coat. "Your husband's men are used to hunting people in cities, suburbs, places where civilization provides cover. Up here, I have every advantage." As they prepared to leave, Evelyn worked with an efficiency that surprised him. She knew how to pack light but essential, how to layer clothing for warmth without bulk, how to move through a space without disturbing anything unnecessarily. This wasn't her first time running. "There's something you should know," she said as they shouldered their packs. "About what I promised you. Now's not the time." "It is the time. Because if something happens to me out there, you need to understand what this is really about." She touched his arm, stopping him. "I wasn't speaking metaphorically. I can give you something no human woman can because I'm not." She stopped, seemed to reconsider her words. "Because I have abilities that others don't." Zeke studied her face in the darkness. "What kind of abilities?" "The kind that let me know your wife's name was Sarah. Your daughter was Emma. You blame yourself for not being there when they needed you most." Her voice was gentle, compassionate. "The kind that tells me you still set 2 places at dinner sometimes, still reach for Sarah in your sleep." The words hit him like a physical blow. He'd never told anyone those details, had never spoken about his family to the people in Cedar Falls. There was no way she could know. How? The word came out as barely a whisper. "It's complicated. But Zeke, what I'm offering you isn't just shelter from your grief. It's actual healing. the kind that lets you remember love without drowning in loss. Before he could process what she meant, shouts echoed through the forest, harsh voices calling orders, the sound of men spreading out in a search pattern. They were out of time. Zeke grabbed a canvas bag from under his bed and quickly filled it with ammunition, medical supplies, and food. From the bottom drawer of his dresser, he pulled out something he hadn't touched since moving to the mountain, his father's compass, brass and silver, the needle steady and true. "This way," he said, leading her to a door at the back of the cabin she hadn't noticed before. It opened onto a narrow deck that connected to the mountainside itself, invisible from the main trail. "Stay close, step where I step, and whatever happens, don't look back." They slipped out into the storm, leaving the warmth and safety of the cabin behind. Within minutes, the building disappeared into the swirling snow, as if it had never existed at all. Behind them, the voices of dangerous men grew steadily closer. The old mining camp sat like a ghost town in the forest, its weathered buildings barely visible through the driving snow. Zeke led Evelyn to the most intact structure, a former equipment shed with stone walls and a partially collapsed roof. Inside, protected from the wind, they could finally catch their breath. "They'll find the cabin within the hour," Zeke said, checking his watch. "When they discover we're gone, they'll start a grid search." Evelyn nodded, pulling something from her pack, a small leather pouch that looked ancient, worn smooth by countless hands. She opened it carefully, revealing an assortment of dried herbs and small vials, filled with various powders and liquids. "What is that?" Zeke asked. "Medicine, the kind my grandmother taught me to make." She selected several items from the pouch, mixing them with practiced skill. "For your shoulder." "My shoulder's fine." "It's been bothering you for months. Old shrapnel wound, I'd guess. Gets worse when the weather changes." She looked up at him with those knowing green eyes. "Am I wrong?" She wasn't. The shoulder had been aching for weeks, a dull throb that intensified with the approaching storm. Zeke had learned to ignore such discomfort, one of many reminders that his body was no longer young, no longer invincible. "How could you possibly? The way you favor it, the unconscious rotation you do when you think no one's watching. It's subtle, but it's there." Evelyn finished mixing her concoction and held it out to him. "Drink this. I don't take medicine from strangers." "Then it's good thing we're not strangers anymore." Her smile was warm despite their circumstances. "Zeke, I know this is confusing. I know none of this makes sense, but please trust me." He looked at the mixture. It smelled of willow bark and something floral he couldn't identify. Against his better judgment, he drank it. The taste was bitter but not unpleasant, with an underlying sweetness that reminded him of honey. "Now what?" "Now we wait for your friends to find the cabin, and you tell me about Sarah." The name still hit him like a sucker punch, even after all these years. "There's nothing to tell. There's everything to tell. She was the center of your world for 23 years. A kindergarten teacher who collected antique teacups and made the best apple pie in Colorado Springs. She laughed at your terrible jokes and forgave you for being gone so much with the army." Zeke's hand moved instinctively to his rifle, though no physical threat had emerged. Somehow, this felt more dangerous than armed men in the forest. "Stop. She used to leave little notes in your gear when you deployed. 'Come home to me,' written on torn pieces of stationery, tucked into ammunition boxes where you'd find them weeks later." Evelyn's voice was gentle, not mocking. "The last one said, 'Our daughter needs her father, but I need my husband.' How do you know that?" The words came out harder than he'd intended. "Because love leaves traces, energy, memories that cling to places and people." She settled back against the stone wall, watching him carefully. "Because you've been carrying those words like stones in your chest for 16 years. The wind howled around their shelter, and in the distance they could see lights moving through the forest toward Zeke's cabin. Professional search patterns, methodical and thorough, but for the moment, they were safe in this forgotten place. Sarah died in October, Zeke found himself saying. The aspens were turning yellow, and she said she wanted to see them one more time. So I carried her out to the porch, wrapped in blankets, and we watched the leaves fall. What did she say? That she wasn't afraid, that she'd had a good life, a good marriage, that Emma would take care of me. He laughed bitterly. She was wrong about that last part. No, she wasn't, Emma tried. You just wouldn't let her. The accusation hung in the air between them, true, but painful to hear aloud. You think I wanted to push my daughter away. You think I chose to be alone. I think grief makes us do things that feel necessary at the time but poison us slowly. Evelyn's hand moved to her pouch again, this time pulling out a small vial of clear liquid. I think you've been punishing yourself so long you've forgotten what forgiveness feels like. She uncorked the vial, and a sweet scent filled the air, lavender and something else, something that made him think of summer evenings and Sarah's garden. His shoulder, which had been a constant source of low-level pain for months, suddenly felt loose and comfortable. What was in that drink? Healing. The physical kind was just the beginning. Evelyn corked the vial and put it away. Zeke, what if I told you that death isn't the end? That the people we love don't just disappear, they find ways to reach us if we know how to listen? I'd say you're either crazy or cruel. I'd say you're scared that if you stop grieving, you'll somehow be betraying their memory. Scared that moving forward means leaving them behind. Through the gaps in the stone wall, they could see the lights had reached the cabin. Shouts echoed across the distance as the men discovered their quarry had fled. Soon, the search would expand outward, and their temporary safety would end. We should move, Zeke said, shouldering his pack. Not yet. They'll expect us to keep running, to put distance between ourselves and the cabin. Instead, we're going to wait until they spread out. Then circle back. That's tactically unsound. It's tactically unexpected, which gives us the advantage. Evelyn stood, checking her weapon with the same professional competence she'd shown packing gear. Zeke, these men aren't just hunting me, they're hunting what I represent to Marcus, a chance at redemption he doesn't deserve. What does that mean? It means this isn't going to end with them giving up and going home. It means we're going to have to stop them. She looked at him directly. Are you prepared for that? Zeke thought about the life he'd built on this mountain, the carefully constructed isolation that had sheltered him from the world's demands and expectations. He thought about Sarah and Emma, about the promise he'd made to Sarah to take care of their daughter, a promise he'd broken through his own weakness. He thought about this strange woman who seemed to know his deepest secrets and offered impossible things. Yes, he said simply, I'm prepared. Outside, the voices grew more distant as the search moved away from their position. Soon, it would be time to move. They waited until the searchlights had moved well past their position before venturing back into the storm. Zeke led them along a deer path he'd walked countless times, moving by instinct more than sight in the swirling snow. Behind him, Evelyn matched his pace with surprising grace, her footsteps silent despite the difficult terrain. The cabin came into view after 20 minutes of careful movement. Light spilled from the windows. The men had restored power and made themselves comfortable. Through the frost-covered glass, Zeke could see 3 figures moving around inside. Professional operators, just as Evelyn had said. They'd searching methodically, examining his belongings with the practiced efficiency of people accustomed to extracting information from physical evidence. They're learning about you, Evelyn whispered, close enough to his ear that her breath warmed his skin. Building a profile, military background, loss of family, self-imposed isolation. They'll use that information to predict your behavior. Let them. They don't know this mountain like I do. From her position beside him, Evelyn reached into her coat and pulled out something that made Zeke's heart stop, a small silver locket on a delicate chain. Even in the dim light, he recognized it immediately. Where did you get that? His voice was barely audible. From your bedroom. It was in the drawer beside your bed. She held it out to him. There's a picture inside. A little girl with your eyes and Sarah's smile. Emma. The locket had been a Christmas gift when she was 16, and she'd worn it every day until everything fell apart. He'd found it among her belongings after the funeral, had kept it as one of the few physical reminders of his daughter. Why did you take it? Because you're going to need it soon. Because what I'm about to tell you will be easier to accept if you're holding something that connects you to her. Zeke took the locket, feeling its familiar weight against his palm. Inside, he knew, was a tiny photograph of Emma, at age 10, grinning gap-toothed at the camera during a family camping trip. Sarah had taken the picture by a mountain lake, not unlike the one visible from his current position. She forgives you, Evelyn said simply. Emma's dead. Death doesn't end love, Zeke. It just changes how love expresses itself. Evelyn's voice carried absolute conviction. Your daughter has been trying to reach you for 14 years. Every time you see a cardinal at your bird feeder, that's her. Every time you smell apple cinnamon when there's no logical source, that's Sarah. They've never left you. That's impossible, is it? You were special forces. You've seen things that defied explanation. You've had instincts that saved your life in situations where logic and training weren't enough. She touched his arm gently. This isn't different. It's just another kind of warfare, the kind fought between love and loss. Inside the cabin, one of the men appeared at the window, scanning the forest with night vision equipment. Zeke and Evelyn pressed themselves against the trunk of a massive pine, invisible in its shadow. Marcus isn't just dying, Evelyn continued quietly. He's desperate to make amends for a lifetime of causing pain. But his idea of amends involves forcing me back into a life I escaped at considerable cost. What did you do to escape? I died. The words were spoken matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. Officially, anyway. Car accident on a mountain road in Montana. Body never recovered, presumed dead. It took me 6 months to plan and execute, but it worked. Until now. Zeke studied her profile in the darkness. If you're dead, how are they tracking you? Because I made a mistake. I tried to contact someone from my old life, someone I thought I could trust. Marcus has people watching everyone who ever mattered to me. Who? From the locket's chain, she pulled a small key that had been hidden beneath the pendant. My daughter. She's 18 now, starting college. I've missed 6 years of her life, and I couldn't stand missing her graduation. The revelation hit Zeke like a physical blow. A daughter. Evelyn had a daughter she'd sacrificed everything to protect, just as he'd failed to protect Emma. Where is she now? Safe, at school in Vermont, under a different name. She thinks I'm dead. It's better that way. Safer. Evelyn's voice carried the weight of profound loss. But I needed to see her, just once, to know she was okay. And that's when they found you. Marcus had people watching her dormitory. They followed me from campus. She closed her eyes briefly. I led them right to her, my own daughter. In the distance, they heard voices calling out search patterns. The men were expanding their perimeter, moving in organized sweeps that would eventually find any hiding place within a mile radius. We need to move again, Zeke said. Not yet. There's something else you need to understand. Evelyn turned to face him fully, her green eyes reflecting starlight. What I can give you, what no human woman can give you, is the ability to say goodbye properly. To Sarah and Emma, to tell them the things you never got to say. That's not possible. It is. I've done it before, for others who carried the kind of grief that kills slowly. It's not magic, Zeke. It's just opening doors that pain and guilt have closed. Before he could respond, a new sound cut through the night, the distant rumble of vehicles on the mountain road below. Reinforcements were arriving, turning a 3-man hunt into something much more dangerous. How many men does your husband have? Zeke asked. As many as he needs. Money isn't an issue, and neither is jurisdiction. He has contacts in places that don't officially exist. The locket felt warm in Zeke's palm, as if responding to his body heat. For just a moment, he could swear he smelled apple cinnamon, Sarah's favorite scent. the one that had filled their house every autumn when she baked pies for the church fundraiser. "Even if what you're saying is true," he said carefully, "even if you could somehow, why would you help me? We're strangers." "Because you remind me of who I used to be, before Marcus, before I learned to run and hide and live in the spaces between identities." Evelyn's hand covered his, warm and steady. "Because sometimes strangers are the only ones who can save us from ourselves." The vehicle sounds were getting closer, multiple engines, heavy trucks that could navigate mountain roads in winter conditions. Professional equipment for a professional operation. "How long do we have?" Evelyn asked. "Until dawn, maybe. After that, they'll have enough light to search effectively." Zeke pocketed the locket and checked his rifle. "There's a place I can take you. Higher up the mountain, defensible position. But it's a hard climb in this weather. I can make it. You don't understand. It's where I buried them. Sarah and Emma. If we go there, if we make our stand there, then maybe it's time you visited them properly." Evelyn shouldered her pack with grim determination. "Maybe it's time you stopped running too." The climb took them 2 hours through terrain that would challenge experienced mountaineers in good weather. With snow falling and wind gusting to 40 miles per hour, it became a test of pure endurance. Zeke led them up switchbacking paths he'd carved himself over the years, routes invisible to anyone who didn't know exactly where to look. Evelyn kept pace without complaint, though he could see the effort it cost her. The wound in her side had reopened despite the bandaging, leaving dark spots in the snow behind them. But she never asked to rest, never slowed their progress. The cemetery sat on a natural shelf of granite halfway up the mountain's eastern face, protected from the worst weather by an overhang of stone. Zeke had chosen this place carefully high enough to be unreachable by vehicles, defensible from multiple approaches, with clear sightlines down the mountain. He'd also chosen it because it was beautiful, with a view of the valley that stretched for 50 miles on clear days. 2 simple headstones marked the graves, carved by Zeke's own hands from local granite. Sarah Elizabeth Callahan, beloved wife and mother. Emma Rose Callahan, cherished daughter and bright light. No dates, no platitudes, just their names and the simple truth of what they'd meant to him. "They're beautiful," Evelyn said quietly, reading the stones by flashlight. "You carved these yourself?" "Took me 6 months. I'm not a stoneworker, but—" He stopped, surprised by the catch in his own voice. "I wanted them to last." From her pack, Evelyn pulled something Zeke hadn't expected to see: a branding iron, small but unmistakably designed for marking cattle. The metal was scorched black, and even in the cold air, it seemed to radiate menace. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "From one of Marcus's men. I took it when I escaped 2 years ago." She set it carefully on a flat stone between the graves. "It's how they mark their victims. Everyone who crosses Marcus gets branded alive or dead. That's what they plan to do to you. That's what they plan to do to both of us. Marcus doesn't just want me back, he wants to make an example. Anyone who helps me, anyone who gets in his way, becomes part of the message." Zeke studied the iron with the eye of someone who'd seen cruelty in many forms. The design was simple but distinctive, a stylized W surrounded by flames. Professional work, made to leave a permanent mark. "How many people have they killed?" "I stopped counting at 20. But Zeke, that's not why I showed you this." Evelyn picked up the iron again, hefting its weight. "I took this because I swore that someday I'd use it on him, that I'd brand Marcus Webb the way he's branded so many others." "Revenge? Justice, there's a difference." Below them, the searchlights had moved closer. The reinforcements had arrived. Zeke counted at least 6 distinct light sources moving through the forest in coordinated patterns. Professional hunters with unlimited resources and no concern for civilian casualties. "They'll find this place eventually," he said, checking his rifle's scope. "Probably before dawn." "Good. I'm tired of running." Evelyn moved to a position behind one of the larger granite boulders, checking fields of fire with the same tactical awareness she'd shown earlier. How many rounds do you have? Enough to make them pay for every yard. Zeke settled into a shooting position that gave him command of the main approach route. But Evelyn, there's something you need to understand. If we make our stand here, if we fight them at my family's grave, this becomes more than just survival. What does it become? Sacred ground, a place where love fought back against the people who destroy it. She was quiet for a long moment, studying the headstones in the wavering beam of her flashlight. When she spoke, her voice carried a weight of absolute conviction. Then that's exactly what this should be. The wind died suddenly, creating an eerie stillness that made every sound carry farther. In the new quiet, they could hear voices much closer than before, harsh commands being given, search patterns being coordinated. The hunters had found their trail. "Zeke," Evelyn said softly, "before this starts, there's something I need to tell you about my daughter, about why I really tried to contact her. Now's not the time. It is the time. Because what I'm about to do, helping you connect with Sarah and Emma, it requires complete honesty between us." She reached into her coat and pulled out a photograph, creased and worn from handling. "Her name is Lily. She's studying pre-med at Dartmouth, wants to be a pediatric surgeon. She has Marcus's eyes, but my stubborn streak." Zeke took the photograph, studying it in the dim light. A young woman with Evelyn's features but softer, unmarked by years of fear and running. She was laughing in the picture, caught in a moment of pure joy that reminded him painfully of Emma at the same age. "She's beautiful. She's everything good that came out of my marriage to Marcus, the only thing that made those years worthwhile." Evelyn's voice was thick with emotion. "When I disappeared, when I let her think I was dead, it nearly killed me, but it was the only way to keep her safe. And now Marcus is dying, and his last act of spite is to drag me back. But it's not just about me anymore. He's threatened to hurt Lily if I don't return willingly. The graduation I attended, he had people there, taking pictures, sending me a message." The pieces clicked into place with horrible clarity. "This isn't about getting you back. It's about punishing you." "Yes, and anyone who helps me becomes part of that punishment." She looked at him directly. "I shouldn't have come here, Zeke. I shouldn't have involved you in this. Too late for regrets." Below them, flashlight beams were getting closer, moving up the mountain in a coordinated assault pattern. Zeke estimated 20 minutes before the first contact. "There's something else," Evelyn said, "about what I promised you. About giving you what no human woman can." "Evelyn, I can see them, Zeke, Sarah and Emma. They're here, right now, standing beside their graves." Her voice was steady, matter of fact. "Sarah's wearing the blue dress you bought her for your anniversary. Emma has on her favorite hiking boots, the ones she wore on your last camping trip together." Zeke's heart hammered against his ribs. "That's impossible, is it? Look at the snow around their headstones. Really look." He followed her gaze and felt his breath catch. The snow around the graves was disturbed, marked with what looked like footprints, but not the heavy boot prints he and Evelyn had left. These were lighter, more delicate, women's shoes. "Sarah says she's proud of you for finally bringing someone home," Evelyn continued quietly. "She says she always hoped you'd find companionship again, even if it took 15 years and the end of the world to make it happen." "Stop." The word came out strangled. "Emma wants you to know she never blamed you for not being there when she died. She says accidents happen and love doesn't require perfect timing. She just needed you to know she forgives you for shutting down afterward." The locket in Zeke's pocket seemed to pulse with warmth. Around them, the air grew thick with something he couldn't name, presence, maybe, or the weight of words too long unspoken. "They're asking me to tell you something else," Evelyn said, tears now flowing freely down her cheeks. "They want you to know that choosing to help me, choosing to fight for something beyond your own pain, this is what they always hoped you'd find the courage to do." A sound echoed up from below, men calling coordinates, closing in on their position. The final confrontation was minutes away. "Zeke," Evelyn said urgently, Do you trust me?" He looked at her, this mysterious woman who knew impossible things, who'd brought armed killers to his sanctuary, but also brought him the first real peace he'd felt in 16 years. Who claimed she could give him what no human woman could, and was somehow, impossibly, doing exactly that. "Yes," he said simply, "I trust you. Then take my hand, and let me show you what goodbye is supposed to feel like." The moment Evelyn's hand touched his, the world shifted. The cemetery, the approaching danger, the bitter mountain, cold everything faded into background noise as warmth flooded through Zeke's consciousness. It started as a gentle tingling in his fingertips and spread upward, carrying with it a sense of profound peace he hadn't felt since before Sarah got sick. Then he saw them. Sarah stood beside her headstone, exactly as Evelyn had described, wearing the blue dress from their 20th anniversary dinner, her hair catching light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. She looked as she had before the cancer, healthy and vibrant, with the smile that had made him fall in love 30 years ago. Emma was there too, not as the broken 22-year-old who died in the car accident, but as the confident young woman she'd been becoming, wearing those ridiculous hiking boots she'd refused to replace, her face bright with the intelligence and compassion that had defined her. "Dad," Emma said, and her voice was exactly as he remembered it. "You look terrible." Despite everything, the danger, the impossibility of what he was experiencing, Zeke laughed. It was such an Emma thing to say, cutting straight to the heart of things with loving bluntness. "I've missed you," he managed. "We know," Sarah said, moving closer. "We've been trying to reach you for so long, but grief is like static on a radio. It drowns out everything else. How is this possible?" "Does it matter?" Emma asked. "You're here, we're here, and finally you're listening." Around them, the physical world continued. Zeke was dimly aware of Evelyn maintaining her grip on his hand, of approaching footsteps and shouted commands. But the spiritual world had become more real, more immediate. "I failed you both," he said, the words that had poisoned him for 16 years, finally spoken aloud. "I should have been there, should have protected you." "From cancer?" Sarah's voice was gentle but firm. "From black ice and drunk drivers? Zeke, love doesn't make us gods. It just makes us human." But I shut down afterward. I pushed Emma away when she needed me most. I couldn't bear to see her pain on top of my own. "I know," Emma said simply, "and I understand. But Dad, look at what you've built here." She gestured to the mountain around them, to the life he'd constructed in isolation. "This isn't healing. This is a shrine to loss." What was I supposed to do? How was I supposed to move forward when everything good in my life was gone? "By living," Sarah said. "By finding new purpose, new connections, by helping people like Evelyn." As if summoned by her name, Evelyn's voice cut through the spiritual connection, urgent and afraid. "Zeke, they're here." The vision didn't fade, but reality intruded. Through the strange double consciousness he was experiencing, Zeke could see armed figures moving up the mountainside, professional killers closing in on their position. The final confrontation was beginning, but in the spiritual realm, Sarah was speaking again, her words carrying desperate urgency. "There's something Evelyn hasn't told you, something she doesn't know herself." "What?" "Show him," Emma said, and suddenly Zeke was seeing not just his family, but another figure, a young woman who looked remarkably like Evelyn. Lily, he realized. Evelyn's daughter. But Lily wasn't at college in Vermont. She was here, somewhere on this mountain, in terrible danger. "Marcus didn't just threaten her," Sarah explained quickly. "He took her, used her as bait to draw Evelyn out of hiding. The men hunting you aren't just here to capture Evelyn, they're here to reunite her with her daughter before they kill them both." The revelation hit Zeke like a physical blow. "Where is she?" "Close," Emma said. "They're using her to ensure Evelyn doesn't run again. But Zeke, there's more. The reason Evelyn can do what she's doing, the reason she can see us, help others connect with the dead." "She's dying," Sarah finished. The wound in her side isn't from running through the forest. It's from cancer, the same kind that killed me. She has maybe weeks left." The spiritual connection wavered as gunfire erupted below them. Real bullets striking real stone, sending chips of granite flying through the air. The men had found their position. "I have to go," Zeke said, but Sarah gripped his arm somehow, both incorporeal and completely solid. "Not yet. You need to understand what she's offering you, what she means when she says she can give you what no human woman can. Peace, healing, the ability to say goodbye. More than that," Emma said. "The chance to save someone the way you couldn't save us. The chance to be the father to Lily that you couldn't be to me after Mom died." Another burst of gunfire, closer now. Evelyn was returning fire, her .22 caliber pistol making sharp cracks in response to the heavier weapons below. "But if she's dying, then she's choosing how to spend her last weeks," Sarah said firmly. "She's choosing to give you the gift of purpose again, the gift of someone to protect. Why? Why would she do that for a stranger?" "Because she recognizes something in you that you've forgotten about yourself," Emma said. "The man who spent 20 years serving his country, who built this entire life with his own hands, who loved his family so completely that losing them nearly destroyed him. She sees the hero you used to be," Sarah added, "the one you still are, underneath all that grief." The sound of approaching footsteps was getting closer. Zeke could hear Evelyn calling his name, could feel the physical world demanding his return. "I don't know how to be that person anymore." "Yes, you do," both women said simultaneously. "You just proved it by trusting her, by choosing to fight beside her instead of hiding alone. But if she dies, then you honor her sacrifice by protecting what she couldn't," Emma said firmly. "By being for Lily what you should have been for me, present, protective, and unafraid of love." The spiritual connection began to fade as the immediate danger intensified. But before they vanished completely, Sarah spoke one last time. "The deed, Zeke, in Evelyn's coat pocket. It's not what she told you." "What?" "It's not about mineral rights or land value. It's about sanctuary. A place where people like Lily can disappear safely, where women running from dangerous men can start over." Sarah's voice was growing distant. Evelyn inherited it from her grandmother, the same woman who taught her about healing herbs and connecting with the dead. It's a legacy of helping others. "That's why Marcus really wants her back," Emma added, her form beginning to shimmer like heat waves. "Not for revenge, but for control of something that threatens his entire operation." The vision ended abruptly as a rifle bullet struck the boulder inches from Zeke's head. He was back in the physical world, completely cold, dangerous, and filled with armed men who wanted them dead. But he was also changed. The crushing weight of grief that had defined him for 16 years had lifted, replaced by something he'd almost forgotten existed: purpose. Evelyn was crouched behind the adjacent boulder, blood seeping through her coat from her reopened wound. When she saw him moving, her face flooded with relief. "Did you see them?" she asked urgently. "Yes, but more importantly, I know about Lily. I know she's here." Evelyn's face went white. "That's impossible. She's safe at school. She's here, on this mountain, and we're going to save her." Zeke checked his rifle, his movements now flowing with purpose he hadn't felt in decades. "But first, we're going to make these bastards pay for every life they've destroyed." Below them, the killers were beginning their final assault. Zeke's transformation from grieving hermit to tactical operator was immediate and complete. 15 years of mountain living fell away like shed skin as his military training reasserted itself. He moved with purpose now, checking ammunition counts, evaluating fields of fire, turning the cemetery into a fortress. "How many?" he asked, settling behind a granite outcropping that commanded the main approach. 8 confirmed, probably more in reserve," Evelyn replied, wincing as she adjusted her position. The bleeding from her side was getting worse, dark stains spreading across her coat. Professional military contractors, armed with automatic weapons and night vision. Equipment. Full tactical gear. Body armor, communications, probably explosives for breaching. She checked her pistol, a Glock 22, that looked impossibly small against the firepower they faced. Zeke, we can't win this fight conventionally. No. But we don't have to. He pulled his father's hunting rifle from its case, a Remington, 300 Winchester Magnum that he'd modified over the years, with a precision scope and custom stock. We just have to make them pay so heavily they reconsider their tactics. From his pack, he removed something that made Evelyn's eyes widen, a collection of improvised explosive devices, carefully crafted from mining supplies he'd found in the abandoned camp below. Not military grade, but effective enough to level the playing field. Where did you learn to make those? Afghanistan. Sometimes regular tactics aren't enough. He positioned the devices along likely approach routes, using his intimate knowledge of the terrain to create choke points and kill zones. The men down there are used to hunting civilians. They're not used to fighting someone who shoots back effectively. As he worked, Evelyn watched him with growing amazement. The broken man she'd found in the cabin was gone, replaced by someone who moved with lethal competence. This was who Zeke Callahan had been before grief crippled him, a warrior whose skills had been sharpened by decades of conflict. "Tell me about Lily," he said as he sighted his rifle. "How did they take her?" "I don't know. She was supposed to be safe, new identity, scholarship under an assumed name, security measures I spent 2 years putting in place." Evelyn's voice cracked. "If Marcus found her, if he hurt her because of me." "Focus on what we can control," Zeke said firmly, his command voice cutting through her panic. "Where would they keep her? Somewhere secure but accessible, close enough to use as leverage but defensible if things go wrong." "The old mining office. 200 yards down the mountain. Solid stone construction. Only one approach." Evelyn's tactical thinking reasserted itself. "But Zeke, if she's really there..." "She is. And we're going to get her back." Below them, voices carried on the wind harsh commands in what sounded like military jargon. The assault team was organizing, probably preparing to move under cover of suppressing fire. "They'll try to pin us down while a flanking team moves around the side," Zeke said, adjusting his scope's elevation. "Standard small unit tactics. The problem is, it usually works. Unless the target knows it's coming and prepared accordingly." He smiled grimly. "These mountains are full of natural advantages if you know how to use them." From his coat, Evelyn pulled out the deed Sarah had mentioned, a thick document wrapped in waterproof cloth. Even in the dim light, Zeke could see it wasn't a standard property transfer. The language was old, formal, referring to sanctuary rights and protection of the persecuted. "Your grandmother really set up a safe house network. 3 generations of women helping other women disappear. My grandmother started it during the Depression, hiding wives from abusive husbands. My mother expanded it during the 70s, helping women escape domestic violence. I was supposed to continue the tradition. Instead, you married Marcus. I was young and stupid and thought I could change him." She folded the deed carefully, tucking it back into her coat. "By the time I realized what he really was, Lily was born, and it was too late to run. Until 2 years ago. Until I finally found the courage to choose my daughter's future over my own safety." A rifle shot cracked through the night, the bullet striking stone 20 feet below their position. Ranging shot, the assault team was testing distances and angles. "Here they come," Zeke murmured, settling into his shooting position. Through his scope, he could see muzzle flashes moving up the mountainside. Professional bounds and overwatch, just as he'd expected. "Evelyn," he said quietly, "when this starts, when they commit to the assault, you need to slip away. I'm not leaving you. You're not leaving me. You're going to get Lily." He looked at her directly. "That's the mission now. Everything else is secondary. Zeke, promise me. Whatever happens here, promise me you'll save your daughter." Before she could answer, the mountainside erupted in gunfire. Automatic weapons opened up from 3 positions, sending a stream of bullets ricocheting off granite and whining through the air above their heads. Suppressing fire, designed to keep them pinned while the flanking teams moved. Zeke waited until he had a clear shot, then squeezed the trigger. The 300 Winchester's report echoed across the valley like thunder, and one of the muzzle flashes below went dark. First blood to the defenders. "Move!" he shouted to Evelyn. "Go get your daughter!" She hesitated for one precious second, looking at him with something that might have been love or gratitude or simple recognition of shared purpose. Then she was gone, slipping away into the darkness, with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent years staying invisible. Alone now among the graves of his family, Zeke settled into the rhythm of combat he'd thought left behind forever. Breathe, aim, fire, relocate, use the terrain, conserve ammunition, make every shot count. The assault team was better than most he'd faced in Afghanistan, but they were attacking uphill against a prepared position held by someone who knew every inch of the ground. His first improvised explosive detonated as 3 men tried to flank through a narrow defile to his left. The blast lit up the mountainside like a brief sunrise, and when the smoke cleared, the flanking attempt had been reduced to screams and confusion. But they kept coming. Professional soldiers following professional doctrine, willing to take casualties to achieve their objective. More muzzle flashes appeared as reinforcements moved up from the vehicles below. 8 men had become 12, then 16. Through his scope, Zeke caught glimpses of faces hard men with the look of veterans, mercenaries who'd sold their skills to the highest bidder. They moved well, communicated efficiently, adapted quickly to his tactics. Under other circumstances, he might have respected their competence. Tonight, they were just obstacles between him and saving an innocent girl. His second explosive took out a machine gun position that was getting too accurate for comfort. The third eliminated a sniper who'd been trying to get a bead on his location. But ammunition and explosives were finite resources, and his enemies had seemingly unlimited reinforcements. Time to change the game. From his pack, Zeke pulled out a device he'd hoped never to use again, a military flare gun loaded with white phosphorus, highly illegal for civilian possession, absolutely devastating in the right circumstances. He'd kept it as insurance against the day his carefully constructed isolation finally failed. That day had arrived. He fired the flare high above the assault team's position, turning night into harsh white day. In the sudden illumination, he could see everything: positions, movement patterns, the locations of men who thought darkness protected them. More importantly, he could see the old mining office down the mountain, where a single light burned in an upper window, where a young woman who looked remarkably like her mother was probably wondering if anyone was coming to save her. "I'm coming, Lily," Zeke whispered, chambering another round. "Your mother sent me." Above him, the flare began its slow descent, and in its dying light, he prepared for the final phase of a battle that would determine whether love or violence ruled this mountain. The white phosphorus flare illuminated the mountainside like a scene from hell, casting harsh shadows and revealing positions that had been hidden moments before. Zeke used the brief advantage to devastating effect, his rifle speaking with precision that came from decades of training and years of hunting in these very mountains. 3 more mercenaries went down before the flare died, leaving the assault team confused and demoralized. But their confusion wouldn't last long. These were professionals who'd adapt quickly to changing circumstances. From his position among the graves, Zeke could see Evelyn moving through the darkness below, using routes he'd shown her during their escape from the cabin. She moved like smoke, invisible one moment and gone the next, heading toward the mining office where her daughter waited. The assault team had pulled back to regroup, which gave Zeke precious minutes to assess the tactical situation. His ammunition was running low, maybe 30 rounds left for the rifle, plus whatever he carried for his sidearm. The improvised explosives were expended. Against 16 professional killers with automatic weapons and unlimited resources, that wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. He activated a device he'd hidden among his gear, an emergency avalanche beacon, the kind used by backcountry skiers to locate buried victims. But Zeke had modified it for a different purpose entirely. The high-frequency signal it emitted would interfere with the mercenaries' communications equipment, fragmenting their coordination just when they needed it most. The effect was immediate. Below him, he could hear frustrated voices trying to establish radio contact, the careful military discipline beginning to break down as unit leaders lost touch with their teams. That's when he saw it movement at the mining office. Not Evelyn's careful approach, but the harsh illumination of tactical flashlights. Someone was bringing Lily out of the building, using her as a human shield. Through his scope, Zeke could see the girl clearly for the first time. 18 years old, Evelyn's features softened by youth but marked by terror. Duct tape covered her mouth, and her hands were bound behind her back. 2 men flanked her, assault rifles trained outward, while a third held her arm with bruising force. The message was clear: surrender, or watch an innocent die. Zeke felt something cold and familiar settle over him, the same deadly calm that had carried him through 100 combat situations. This was no longer about survival or even justice. This had become personal in a way that transcended tactics or strategy. These men had made the mistake of threatening a child under his protection. He triggered his final surprise, a series of small charges he'd placed along the approach routes hours earlier, when he'd first prepared the cemetery for defense. Not enough to kill, but sufficient to create chaos and confusion at the crucial moment. The explosions came in sequence, starting at the bottom of the mountain and working upward like a string of firecrackers. In the sudden cacophony, Zeke moved from his position for the first time since the battle began, flowing down the mountainside with the fluid grace of someone who'd spent 15 years learning every rock and tree. He reached the mining office perimeter just as the confusion peaked, his approach masked by the ringing echoes of the explosions. The 2 guards flanking Lily were looking outward, expecting attack from the cemetery above. They never saw him coming. The first man went down to a rifle, shot from 30 yards, a clean hit to the center of mass that dropped him instantly. The second spun toward the muzzle flash, bringing his weapon to bear, but Zeke was already moving, flowing through the darkness like a predator. The knife he'd carried since Afghanistan found its target with surgical precision, sliding between ribs to pierce the heart before the mercenary could raise an alarm. Professional violence, quick and clean and final. That left the man holding Lily a thick-built operative with the scarred face of someone who'd survived multiple conflicts. He pressed the barrel of his pistol against the girl's temple, using her body to shield himself as he backed toward the building. "Stay back," he shouted, his voice carrying the accent of Eastern Europe. "I kill the girl if you come closer." Zeke emerged from the shadows, his rifle trained on the man's exposed shoulder. At this range, with this weapon, he could make the shot, but not without risk to Lily. The margin for error was too small, the consequences of failure too catastrophic. "Let her go," Zeke said quietly, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. "This is between you and me. You think I'm stupid. You think I don't know who you are." The mercenary's grip on Lily tightened. Former Special Forces, 15 years in the mountains, probably the most dangerous man in Colorado. "You let me walk out of here, or the girl dies." Behind the man, Zeke caught a glimpse of movement, Evelyn, approaching the building from the far side. She'd reached the objective, but now what? They couldn't risk a firefight with Lily in the crossfire. That's when he remembered something from his conversation with Sarah and Emma. Something about Evelyn's abilities, about what she could do when desperate circumstances required impossible solutions. Time to trust the woman who'd given him back his purpose. The standoff stretched for eternal seconds, Zeke with his rifle trained on an impossible shot, the mercenary using Lily as a human shield, death balanced on a knife's edge in the bitter mountain air. Then Evelyn stepped into view behind the gunman, and everything changed. She wasn't carrying a weapon. Instead, she held something that gleamed silver in the starlight, her wedding ring, the one she'd removed and left behind as a symbol of choosing a new life with Zeke. But now it served a different purpose entirely. "Marcus," she called out, her voice carrying clearly in the cold air. The mercenary spun toward her voice, momentarily confused. "What?" "I said, Marcus." Evelyn's voice had changed, becoming deeper, more authoritative. "You work for Marcus Webb. You take his money. You follow his orders. You do his dirty work. But do you know what Marcus really is?" The gunman kept his weapon trained on Lily but couldn't resist looking at Evelyn. That moment of divided attention was all Zeke needed. He adjusted his aim to compensate for the new angle, finger taking up slack on the trigger. "He's a dead man," Evelyn continued, and something in her tone made even Zeke pause. "Dying of the same cancer that killed his first wife, rotting from the inside out. And you know what he's doing with his last few months? Using them to destroy everything good he ever touched." The ring in her hand began to glow, not with reflected light, but with something internal, as if heated from within. The mercenary stared at it, transfixed despite his training. "Look at me," Evelyn commanded, and her voice carried a weight that seemed to compress the air around them. "Look at me and see what Marcus has made of the people who loved him." The man's eyes met hers, and suddenly he staggered, as if struck by an invisible blow. The pistol wavered away from Lily's head as his grip loosened involuntarily. That was the opening Zeke had been waiting for. The rifle shot echoed across the mountainside like thunder, and the mercenary dropped instantly, a clean headshot that ended the threat without endangering the girl. Lily collapsed to her knees, sobbing through the duct tape as adrenaline and terror finally overwhelmed her composure. Evelyn rushed to her daughter, cutting the restraints with a knife she'd taken from one of the fallen mercenaries. "Lily, baby, I'm here. I'm here." The girl looked up at her mother, the woman she'd believed dead for 2 years, with eyes that cycled through disbelief, joy, and confusion in rapid succession. When Evelyn peeled away the tape covering her mouth, Lily's first word was barely a whisper. "Mom?" "Yes, baby. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I let you think I was dead. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from this." They held each other in the shadow of the mining office while Zeke maintained overwatch, scanning for additional threats. The immediate danger was over, but 12 more mercenaries were somewhere on the mountain, and they wouldn't give up easily. "We need to move," he said quietly. "This position is compromised." Evelyn nodded, helping Lily to her feet. The girl was stronger than she looked, shaken but not broken, with her mother's core of resilience already asserting itself. "Can you walk?" Evelyn asked. "I think so. But Mom, those men, they said terrible things about what they were going to do to you. To both of us. They're not going to do anything to anyone ever again," Zeke said firmly, approaching with his rifle still ready. "But your mother's right. We need to get you somewhere safe." Lily looked at him with curious eyes, taking in his weathered face and obvious competence. "Who are you?" "Someone your mother helped when I needed it most. Now I'm returning the favor." From her coat, Evelyn pulled out the deed that represented 3 generations of helping women disappear. "There's a place," she said to Zeke, "part of the network my grandmother built. A ranch in Montana where people can start over completely. New identities, new lives, protection from people like Marcus. How do we get there? First, we survive the next few hours. Then we disappear properly, all 3 of us." Zeke looked at her sharply. "All 3? If you want to. If you're ready to leave this mountain and find a new purpose." Evelyn's hand found his, warm despite the cold. "I know what Sarah and Emma told you. About being the father to Lily that you couldn't be to Emma after I died. The offer hung in the air between them, a chance at redemption, at family, at the kind of healing that went deeper than medicine could reach. But first, they had to survive what was coming." In the distance, voices echoed through the forest as the remaining mercenaries regrouped for a final assault. But for the first time since the ordeal began, Zeke felt genuinely confident about their chances. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for the future, all three of them together. 6 months later, Zeke stood on the porch of a new cabin, watching the sun rise over the Montana wilderness. The structure was larger than his old home, built for 3 people instead of 1, with extra bedrooms and a kitchen designed for family meals rather than solitary survival. In his hands, he held the foundation stones they'd laid together during the spring, granite blocks carefully selected and positioned to support not just a building, but a new life. Each stone represented something they'd chosen to build rather than something they'd lost. The remaining mercenaries had never made it off the mountain. When morning came and reinforcements failed to check in, Marcus Webb's organization had written off the operation as a total loss. The man himself had died 3 weeks later, taking his vengeance and his network of violence with him to whatever judgment awaited men like him. Evelyn emerged from the kitchen, carrying 2 cups of coffee and moving with the careful grace of someone managing pain. The cancer was progressing as predicted. She had weeks rather than months left, but her face held a peace that hadn't been there during their desperate flight through the Colorado mountains. "How are you feeling?" Zeke asked, taking one of the cups. "Like someone who got to see her daughter graduate from high school properly this time." Evelyn settled into the chair beside him, looking out over the valley where Lily was visible in the distance, riding the mare they'd bought her as a graduation gift. Like someone who got to say goodbye properly. They'd attended the ceremony together, all 3 of them, watching Lily accept her diploma under her real name for the first time in 2 years. No longer hiding, no longer running, simply a young woman ready to start college with the support of 2 people who'd learned what it meant to fight for family. "She's going to be a wonderful doctor," Zeke said, watching Lily guide the horse through a series of gentle turns. In the month since the mountain, she'd grown into her own strength, processing the trauma of her kidnapping with the resilience she'd inherited from her mother and the steady support of the man who'd become her protective father figure. "She's going to change the world," Evelyn agreed. "One patient at a time, the way her grandmother would have wanted." The deed to the sanctuary network now rested in a safety deposit box in town, with provisions ensuring it would pass to Lily when she came of age. But the real legacy wasn't in legal documents. It was in the knowledge that love could triumph over violence, that family could be chosen as well as born, that healing was possible even after the worst losses. Zeke's old cabin in Colorado had been sold to a young couple looking for their own escape from civilization. He'd kept only a few items: his father's compass, the wooden cross, and the locket with Emma's picture. The rest had gone to people who needed a fresh start more than he needed reminders of his isolation. "Do you miss it?" Evelyn asked, reading his thoughts with the same intuitive understanding that had marked their relationship from the beginning. "The solitude, the simplicity." "I miss the certainty," Zeke admitted. "Up there, I knew exactly what each day would bring. No surprises, no complications, no one depending on me for anything important. And now I wake up wondering if Lily remembered to take her allergy medication, whether you need help with the garden, if the foundation stones are settling properly." He smiled, surprised by his own contentment. "It's terrifying and wonderful and nothing like I expected." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their daughter, for that's what Lily had become. To both of them practice the riding skills that would serve her well in Montana's wide spaces. She'd adapted to ranch life with the same determination she brought to her pre-med studies, throwing herself into this new chapter with characteristic intensity. "There's something I need to tell you," Evelyn said quietly, "about what happens after." "I know." Zeke's hand found hers, fingers interlacing in a gesture that had become natural over the months. The doctors were clear about the timeline. "Not that. Something else." She turned to face him, her green eyes still bright despite the illness ravaging her body. "When I'm gone, when you're taking care of Lily on your own, you won't be alone." "Evelyn, I mean it. The connection we forged on that mountain, the one that let you see Sarah and Emma, it doesn't end with death, it just changes form." Her voice carried absolute conviction. "I'll find ways to reach you, to help you when you need guidance. Little signs, small miracles, moments of impossible comfort. Like Sarah's apple cinnamon scent?" Exactly like that. Love doesn't end, Zeke. It just learns new ways to express itself. From the barn, they heard Lily calling out she'd spotted something in the distance, riders approaching along the ranch road. Visitors were rare in this remote valley, but not unwelcome. The sanctuary network had grown over the months, with women and children arriving regularly to start new lives, free from the violence that had shaped their past. "More guests?" Zeke asked, shading his eyes to see better. "Probably. Mrs. Henderson in town said there was a woman asking about places to disappear. Husband with connections to organized crime. 2 young children who need safety more than their mother needs pride." Zeke nodded, already thinking about logistics, which cabin was ready for occupancy, what supplies they'd need, how to integrate new arrivals into the community they'd built. It was work that gave his life meaning in ways he'd never expected. "You know what the best part is?" Evelyn said, watching him plan automatically for people he'd never met. "You're becoming exactly who Sarah always knew you could be. The protector, the provider, the man who puts family first even when family isn't blood." The riders were closer now, a woman and 2 children, their posture speaking of exhaustion and hope in equal measure. Soon, Zeke would help them unload their belongings, show them to their new home, begin the process of teaching them how to build safety from scratch. But for this moment, he simply sat with the woman who'd given him everything no human woman could, the ability to love again, to trust again, to believe that second chances were possible even in the darkest circumstances. In his pocket, the wooden cross his father had taught him to carve felt warm against his fingers. Above them, the Montana sky stretched endless and blue, full of possibilities that hadn't existed 6 months ago. And in the distance, Lily rode toward home, ready to help new arrivals find the same sanctuary that had saved them all. Sometimes, a single knock on the door really could change a man's entire life. Sometimes strangers became family, and sometimes love found ways to heal wounds that seemed permanent. Sometimes, if you were very lucky and very brave, you got to discover what goodbye was supposed to feel like, not as an ending, but as a transformation into something larger and more enduring than the pain that came before. The foundation stones were solid beneath their feet, and the future stretched ahead like an unwritten story full of promise.